Part-timer.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. If you're either here in person or on the World Wide Web, we're thrilled you're here. And since 6 p.m. this evening, we've been in closed session for purposes or discussion of lawfully closed meeting minutes, appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district. And finally, litigation where an action against, affecting, or on behalf of a particular district has been filed or is pending before a court or administrative tribunal. So with that, I would like to ask if we can come out of closed session.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to come out of closed. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okie doke. And again, want to welcome everyone and remind everyone are so important. Every meeting we talk about this, and truly in all of our 22 buildings live by this day in and day out, and that is our mission, to educate students to be self-directed learners, collaborative workers, complex thinkers, quality producers, and community contributors. And with that, I will ask our board secretary for a roll call, please.
Okay, Student Ambassador President Stephen Trainer, Board Members President Donna Wanke, Susan Price, Terry Fielden, Jackie Romberg, Kristen Fitzgerald, Susan Crotty, and Mike Kench.
Not Terry Fielden.
Gerald, Terry's not here. Okay. Thank you for that roll call. And this evening we have Scott Elementary School going to help us in the Pledge of Allegiance. So please stand if you're able. And we will have
My favorite elementary school.
Mine too.
Good evening. My name is Nick Kosinski, principal at Scott School. I'm here with 5 students from Scott School. They're going to lead us in the pledge, and they're going to introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Heaven. I'm in 5th grade and I go to Scott School. Hi, I'm Christina. I'm in 5th grade and I go to Scott School.
We're okay. Just pass this down.
Okay.
There, we like that.
My name is Heaven. I'm in 5th grade and I go to Scott School. Hi, my name is Christina. I'm in 5th grade and I go to Scott School.
I'm Dominic. I'm in 5th grade and I go to Scott School.
There you go.
I'm Joseph. I'm in 5th grade at Scott School.
Hi, I'm Mary. I go to Scott Elementary School and I'm in 3rd grade.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Good luck next year, junior high. Oh, it's my favorite part. Oh, certainly a big favorite part of my day. Next, good news. Also favorite.
We do have some good news on a number of items. First, I'd like to introduce and ask George Gaspari from Educational Manager, SIPC consultant with AmSam Chicago to come forward. And you can have a seat here at the table. I think he's going to make a couple brief remarks, but congratulate. Sitting's fine, and I'm just ask you to use the microphone right in front of you there. Push the blue light. But I'll let him speak a little bit more about this. But Naperville Community School District 203 is going to be presented with a Gold Stewardship Award for continued proactive approach to green cleaning. It is resulting in a healthier environment in all of our buildings. So, George?
I noticed on the agenda limit to 3 to 5 minutes, so I'll keep it to 3 to 5 minutes. And thank you for that. I appreciate that. Before I start and before I present the award, I just wanted to review where we were at and how we got to this point. Illinois mandated green cleaning, and when Illinois mandated green cleaning, District 203, like all the schools, began to take a look at their products and procedures with each of the schools. There were mandates, and the mandates were product specific. but there were also recommendations. The 34-page report by the state of Illinois included both those mandates and recommendation. The recommendations dealt with best practices. The SIPC, or the Schools of Illinois Public Cooperative, is a curriculum-based initiative that closely aligns itself with LEAD being the Leadership and Energy and Development Design. And what they did is they put together a credit system where they give credits for points for mandates and the recommendations. And once a school or once a district reached 80 credits, they were certified. And I should say that the district began with the SIPC about a little over a year ago, and halfway through they were certified. But that wasn't good enough. Steve Mathis and Mr. Ori says, what's the next level we can go to? So, as I said, they put together the curriculum, and the curriculum took all the schools, all 22 schools, and we had to take a look at the matrix of all the schools. So, and I should say about the SIPC, the SIPC of the Schools of Illinois was put together by administrators throughout the state of Illinois. On behalf of the SIPC, I'd like to commend Naperville District 203 on their proactive approach to green initiatives. By joining the School of Illinois Public Cooperative and embracing sustainable cleaning, you've ensured success in managing healthy buildings for students to learn in. And I take a look at the mission statements, and they're in buildings that are conducive to learning. The SIPC was established to enable participating districts, which now there's over 350 in the state of Illinois and 70 in the greater Chicago area, to utilize the co-op for supplies, training, and also building assessment, workplace examination, management reporting, certified training, and compliance assistant. Under these management reports, we now document, and the district documents how it complies with the Illinois Green Cleaning Act. We've also developed a green cleaning policy to maximize cleanliness while at the same time reducing the consumption of natural resources and unnecessary hazards within the building. See, green cleaning is more just than the products. It encompasses everything. It utilizes the Green Seal products, the certified product approved by the state. When we talk about recommendation, the state, when they put together the Green Cleaning Act, they didn't mandate equipment. But if we're going to talk about being good stewards and we're going to talk about children in schools, the district utilizes this and they take a look at the equipment that both increases productivity and protects the environment, making sure, like on their vacuum cleaners, making sure that it has proper filtration. It encompasses everything. We talk about the environment. We talk about how to protect the built environment. When the district looks at purchasing their products now, they look at dilution control. They look at better ways of delivering that product to the buildings. What effect does that have? That affects the environment. That affects the resources that we use. If they can extend the cycle of stripping within the schools, that's a win-win for everybody. I'd like to congratulate Naperville School District 203 and all 22 buildings for their proactive approach in reaching goal stewardship. Goal stewardship is the best of the best in the state of Illinois. I believe there's about 22 or 23 within the state of Illinois. Naperville is now part of that. I'm passionate about this. I've had one job in my adult life, and it's been in this industry as servicing schools. So when a school puts forth the effort, the whole staff, I thoroughly enjoy, and I like to communicate that to the community, to the parents, to the administrators. I'd like to recognize the following individuals for the work on the project. And I apologize, I don't want to turn my back to anybody, but Dee Hobbs is back there. Dee, if you want to just stand up for a second. Dee is your consultant to the district. He works hand in hand with the staff in ensuring that the buildings on a go-forward basis make sure everything, the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. I'd also like to commend Building and Grounds Director Steve Mathis and Operations Manager Kevin Ori. They were very instrumental in helping us work with this project because, as I said, it's not just about the products, it encompasses everything. At this time, it's my pleasure to congratulate the Board of Education and present you with the Gold Stewardship Cleaning Award. And two things I wanted to also say before I present you with the award is that I mentioned the 22 buildings. Dee is going to make sure that he stops at each of the individual buildings, meets with the principals, and also gives them a plaque so they can put it in the front office. Because I think it's important that everybody shares this with not only the staff, but the students, the visitors, and the parents that come in there into the office. I know I have 5 children, and they're all grown now. I still have 2 in college, but from time to time I'd get called to the office. And, you have a tendency to look and read what's in the office. And it's great when they get to read something like this, to know that they send their children to be educated. And they're educated in the buildings that's conducive to learning. And then on a go-forward basis, Dee will work with both Steve and Kevin to make sure that if there are any changes that need to be taking place, proactively they will. So again, on behalf of the SIPC, and I'll just reiterate, in recognition of achieving SIPC green cleaning gold status, which is best of the best, and a commitment to green cleaning resulting in healthy environment for the students, staff, and visitors for the schools in District 203.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's wonderful.
I'd just certainly like to echo the comments that were made and congratulate Steve and Kevin and your staffs at the buildings. In addition to this recognition, are always ready for our kids. They look fantastic, and they really make a great statement about what we think about our schools and our kids. You do a fantastic job in our schools, and thank you so much for your commitment. George and Dee, thank you so much for your support and partnership with us on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops.
All right, we have a lot of great news to continue with here. I'm going to go a little bit out of order because Nathan Lindquist couldn't be here tonight. Nathan, you didn't make it, did you? Oh, okay. So let me read this. Let me share with you. Nathan Lindquist performed so well on his AP Calculus BC exam in May 2013 that he falls into a rather select category. Advanced placement exam scores are reported on a scale of 1 to 5, where a 5 is equivalent to grades of A+ and A in the corresponding college course. Nathan received the top score of 5. Only 14.3% of the 3,938,100 exams taken in 2013 earned this top score. But this goes on a little bit in terms of what makes his performance more impressive. He was one of only 11 students in the world to earn every point possible on the Calculus BC exam, answering every multiple choice question correctly and earning the maximum scores on each of the essays in the free response section of the exam. So congratulations to Nathan, and congratulations, Mr. Pops, to the Naperville North staff and teachers. What a direct reflection of the quality education that Nathan's receiving at your school, but congratulations to Nathan. That's outstanding. If we have an opportunity to recognize him at a future board meeting, we will do that.
Awesome.
Like Mr. Pops and Mr. Wiesbrook to join me.
I love how they wear orange and he wears red all the time.
Yeah, don't they look? Yeah.
No, you
so-
are so true blue to the colors of your schools, gentlemen. Just true blue. They clash all the time. The orange and red
Okay.
always clashes.
And I appreciate the partnership that they share. All right. The National Hispanic Recognition Scholar Program was initiated in 1983 to identify outstanding Hispanic Latino high school students. This year, the NHRP is recognizing about 5,300 Hispanic Latino students selected from a pool of over 259,000 who took the 2012 PSAT and MSQT earlier. Students recognized by the NHRP are at least one quarter Hispanic Latino and have achieved a minimum PSAT score for their region. Students with a junior year cumulative GPA of 3.5 or higher are designated as scholars, and I'll invite our 2 principals to introduce the award recipients.
Thank you. Our recipient, again, one of the top 2% in the nation. I'd like a nice round of applause for Jessica Matos. Jessica, come on up. Jessica, I snuck a peek at your senior year schedule. There's a few seniors who, after 3 rigorous years in high school, kind of let up just a little bit in their senior year. And Jessica, I saw, I think 4 AP classes, and I just snuck a little peek at your current grades, and every single grade A+. So Jessica is keeping the accelerator full throttle on her education. Congratulations, Jessica.
And I'd like to recognize Danny Sanchez. Daniel Sanchez. Danny's from a family that's made us very proud. He's the third Husky to be with us, and Danny plans a career in engineering. So, thank you. We also should recognize, I don't think Sebastian, you're not with us? No. Sebastian Wagner Carina is also being recognized for his achievement in the National Hispanic Recognition Program.
Family who may want pictures taken, or communications director who may want a picture. Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
We'll let Mr. Wiesbrook stay with us and invite Mr. Lutzenkirk, our athletic director, Coach Bonet, and Tiffany to come forward, please. Sorry, Tiffany, you have to come up here. All right. Sophomore Tiffany Chen completed an outstanding season and captain with an IHSA state singles championship. Tiffany finished the 2013 season with an incredible 34-1 overall record, only losing 4 sets the entire season. She is the individual champion of the St. Charles tournament, the DVC tournament, the sectional tournament, and named a member of the All-State team for the 2nd year in a row. Most important, she's added to the legacy of the Naperville Central Athletics by earning the 2013 IHSA Individual State Tennis Championship. Congratulations, Tiffany. And as a team, the Naperville Central girls finished 5th place in the IHSA finals with an impressive 15-1 overall record, including 7-0 performance in DuPage Valley Conference. The Red Hawks won several tournaments this year, including the conference tournament and sectional tournament. So congratulations to head coach Don Bonet and his assistants for the whole tennis team for an outstanding season, and to our state champion Tiffany, congratulations.
Wonderful news. Thank you. And thank you, everyone that participated in all that good news. The next part of our meeting is public comment. I don't have any slips. If there's anybody that would like to speak and didn't get a chance or did not know they needed to fill out a form, please let me know. I don't see anybody waving their hands. But just for the record, if you're an individual and wish to speak at a future meeting, you would have 3 minutes. And if you're representing a group, 5 minutes. So keep that in mind if there's ever something you would like to speak about. And we will move on to communications, and we'll start with Student Ambassador Report. Steve, we'll start with you, and because you're representing Naperville Central,
Thank you.
Austin's not here this evening. So please go ahead.
Well, this past month has been very busy at Naperville Central. A couple of things to highlight was our blood drive we had last week on November 12th. It's something we do every year, and it was a real big success this year. And just want to thank everyone who came out and donated blood, as well as our heart testing that took place on October 31st and November 1st. And I just want to thank the district for a great opportunity for all of our students to be able to take that test. It's a free test that most people don't realize how important it is to get tested for EKG screening, and it's something that I've done in the past 2 years, and I really value it. I really appreciate how we have that opportunity for that. Upcoming, we have our annual food drive to donate food to Feed My Starving Children. So if you're in the building and you want to drop by some canned, non-perishable goods, please do so. As well as our holiday food drive we're having this year. Holiday toy drive this year. And all the toys will be donated to Braided Elementary, where parents will have a time to come and buy presents for their children at a cheaper price while they actually have their students working with volunteers, with like games and stuff. So it gives them a place to shop while they're not, they have a place to have their kids go. And that event is on December 14th. And if anyone's willing to come out and volunteer, it's great. I've worked with Brady before, and it's a great opportunity to help out someone that needs it more than us. Also, if you want more information on that, just contact Mrs. Wilkinson. She's a comm arts teacher at April Central. And also this Thursday, our intro to business students are having an opportunity to kind of show what they've learned all semester at Tom and Eddie's. They're all, each class has created and named a hamburger, and they have people come out and vote for the best one. So it's a nice opportunity for them to get some hands-on experience with your marketing and seeing what works and what doesn't work. So if you're around this Thursday, just come out to Tom and Eddie's, and we greatly appreciate it. And also, we've had a very busy fall season with sports. Our boys soccer team finished third in the state class 3A, and our girls cross country finished 11th. And Katie Hoffman was finished as an all-state runner, as long as the boys cross country finished 24th in the state. Girls swim and dive, they were sectional champions this year, and 10 girls have qualified for the state finals this coming weekend. And as we're all very excited about, our football team won on Friday against Neuqua. It was a very exciting game. And this Saturday night at 7 p.m. at Central, we're going to have the semifinal game against Merritt High School. So if you're around, please come out and support our Red Hawks. And that's about it. Thank you very much.
Is that televised? We've had this. We have a Triple I conference. Oh, webcast. Okay, we've had this happen before.
Last year.
Well,
2 years ago.
yeah, 2 years ago, and then a few years ago for
Bolingbrook.
the other. The other high school in town had it a couple years ago too. We did too.
Same one. Yep.
No. North had it like 4 or 5 years ago. We had to find communication.
We'll be able to see the action.
It was not. Okie doke. Thank you so much, Stephen. Appreciate it. Thank you. And next on our list, written communication. You're welcome. It's in board docs to see who has asked for some FOIA requests. And next we have superintendent staff school report.
Fantastic. As a school district, we are very fortunate to have a very strong business community who provides great support to the students in our schools, the staff in our schools, and the school district in general. Many of you who have been to Future Focus have heard me talk about this and say this many times, but I'm also always driven back to our beliefs that as an exemplary school district, we depend on a successful collaboration among our students, our staff, our parents, and our community, and that includes our business community. During our work over the summer, this past summer, the Board of Education identified as one of its short-term priorities to relook at our short-term business, to look at our school business partnership program. And our Director of Community Relations, Julie Carlson, has been doing just that with also with our Director of Communications and also our Deputy Superintendent and myself. And tonight she's going to give us an update on kind of a current state, a past state, and where we're headed with our partnership. So Julie, if you want to come forward.
Who are you, Terry? Tom? Tom's here. Tom's here.
I didn't want to miss your portion, Julie.
Good evening.
2 blue lights.
Okay. As Superintendent Bridges indicated, we've done a little bit of analysis on current state of business partnerships in the district. We began by analyzing the current state of business partnerships back in September when we conducted a survey of district leaders. Not surprisingly, we learned that there are many active school business partnerships currently in place across the district. Based on the criteria outlined in School Board Policy 8.82, we use this criteria to understand about those partnerships, and then we use these responses to inquire further with our leaders about the nature of those partnerships. Some of the input that we received from our district leaders indicated that our most exemplary partnerships provide the following benefits to our school communities: budgetary savings, goodwill, community exposure to student and staff learning, activity, and talents. They provide an opportunity to promote an understanding of the needs in our schools. They also generate awareness about curriculum and skills. They engage local business owners and leaders in learning about our programs of study. They expose students to careers and community contributors. They provide for great local interest stories. And all of these benefits are tied directly to the district mission and vision. We continue to work with all of our schools to identify partnerships that are in place, but we know especially at our high schools that we have many active partners. Because we know these great partnerships exist across our schools, we are very pleased to announce that we will be hosting the Exemplary School Business Partnership Breakfast again this year on Tuesday, February 11th. The purpose of this event will be to celebrate the strong partnerships between District 203 and our business community, as well as to nurture, build, and strengthen these current relationships with the goal of creating even more exemplary partnerships. Among our partners, we find many public and private organizations serving the mission of our schools. We look forward to rebuilding a coalition of community leaders to help us create a structure and a process for advancing the knowledge and skills among all stakeholders to improve outcomes for our students. Our future goal is to recruit and engage a local team of business advisors to serve as a high-quality accelerant for student success. Together, we will develop our program and our philosophy to connect, spark, and empower equity and excellence for all members of our learning community. We will connect by identifying mutual interests and build synergistic systems of support. We will spark authentic conversations and make sure that everyone is listening to build on creativity and innovation. And we will empower by building on the strengths of our local talent and resources. This team will bring business resources and operations to our schools while developing students who are community contributors. The tagline for our Future Focus Community Engagement Initiative reads, "Educate, collaborate, and communicate." When participants were invited to rank student success indicators during Future Focus, college and career readiness emerged as the #1 priority of our community. To continue to grow and prosper as a community, we need an educated, skilled, and engaged workforce. Collaboration, communication, and unity of purpose throughout all community organizations affirms this desired state. Therefore, our partnership program will bring together education and business to speak a common language, one that is focused on student growth and continuous improvement, consistent with our beliefs, mission, and vision. At this time, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions? Julie, I'll ask a question. Is it kind of a fundamental principle that a business partnership would have to be able to get back at a curricular level at the building, or are there all different things that work into it? I'm asked that all the time. And I guess my next question, if you can think about it, is sponsorships and partnerships, if we can kind of roll that together. Thanks.
So ideally, with our partnerships, there will be a curricular benefit. We would try to leverage authentic learning opportunities for our students. We have coming up next month, and it's on the calendar for all of you, the Crosstown Mock Trial. It's an opportunity where we work with a law firm to give kids exposure to real-world experience of trying a case ripped from the headlines. We also engage community contributors. There are a number of representatives of our community who are going to serve as jurors that day. So that's a level of a partnership as well, not only the law firm that's working with the classrooms and the students to prepare them for the case, but also our community partners who are going to serve as jurors to help our students as well. And then sponsorships is another level altogether. But this is why we want to reassemble a coalition of leaders to help us work through that process.
And we'll just say that at some point in the near future, we would be interested in having a conversation with the Board of Education about that idea of sponsorship and relationships in a different way, aside from the type of business partnerships that we're working to develop through Julie's work.
And I appreciate, and I truly appreciate the delineation, because they're very different. And then maybe when we speak about partnership, or I'm sorry, with sponsorships, if we can talk about the people that want to put their advertisements and all. So, but they're definitely different. But thank you so much. I think it's a beautiful treasure we have, and it hasn't stopped. I understand that. It's alive and well in a lot of the buildings. And when you talked about the mock trial, if you haven't been to the mock trial, it rocks. It absolutely is very, very exciting.
I have a couple questions. Nothing we haven't discussed ever in the past, but we used to have kind of 250 documented business partnerships, and all of them aren't really what you would call partnerships. Some of them were sponsorships, things like that. And then we used to do the entrepreneurial event with our business partners, and it seemed like one of us served on that committee, rotating, but we're always like signing new business partnerships and recruiting them. How do you do that today?
Well, today we're not doing that presently. It's been suspended, but we do want to bring back an advisory council of leaders to help us with that process. One of the things that had been absent in the past with that process was a review, and when we do acknowledge partners, we want to make sure that we have a review process in place to ensure that the mutual goals of both parties have in fact been met, and if that's the case, then we'll go ahead and extend those. But these are all things that we want to put together as we move forward in process.
Okay. Yep. So I'm looking at your building a robust, it kind of tags off of Susan's question on building a robust partnership program, and there was a survey done of business partners a few years ago, right? Mm-hmm. And so are we using that? Because there was a lot of good feedback from the business community with the partnerships on those surveys, because I think it was all online, and I remember reading through it at one point. So I hope that we're going back and using that as we build forward. And are we making changes in accordance with some of those things that we heard in that survey?
We will look at that survey again when we reconvene a group of leaders. We're really hoping that with the partnership awards breakfast that we're hosting, that it will be a call to action to invite people to join this coalition of leaders so that we can consider that as well as other data points to make sure that as we rebuild this program, it's one that is responsive to not only what's taking place in the classroom and what our teachers need and what our students need, but also what the business community would like to see.
Right. So as Jackie said, the partnerships have continued to exist. The growth of the partnership program, the partnership recognition has kind of sat idle for a little bit, and that's something that we're really seeking to bring back, and an opportunity, a more formal way to continue to develop meaningful partnerships that fit the criteria that Julie talked about in her program. So all of that is certainly underway at this time, and we hope to come back, use the breakfast in February as a launch, really to really start to grow and develop and nurture continued relationships.
I think it's great that you're bringing it back. We have such a long history with the partners, and I think our district was really forward-thinking in getting them going some time ago, but it's great to see them coming back, and also to see your efforts to try to, I think I'm reading, reinvent them a little bit in terms of looking at the curricular areas and specifically looking at college and career readiness. Our community has so many resources in that way in terms of really wonderful businesses that really have community leaders, and I think it's really fantastic for our students to be able to learn about that and utilize that and see themselves in that area. It's a real role model. We have so many great community role models. I just wondered if you have a little bit more of a sense of the timeline. So you're working on working on recruiting for the advisory council with the launch being in February. What's your timeline in terms of putting that council together in terms of looking forward?
Well, ideally, I'd like to have something in place by the end of the year, the end of the school year,
okay,
so that we can begin doing some work together as a team.
Okay.
And I think what I liked what in Julie's comments, so we've had the community speak in Future Focus, and they said college and career readiness. But what I've heard sitting on that council for years is, overall post-secondary and how does that work into job readiness skills, and internships are so huge. It's huge for the kids that are doing different, other than four-year schools, whatever they're doing post-secondary. And if the business partnerships really, if we get the right group together, it's going to be so rich. And I think, things need a reset sometimes, and a hard reset, and you can come back alive and well. And I don't know, the process worked, and there were great people on there, but we really didn't have internships and different things. So that's why I'm so interested at how it really translates to the classroom. Because those richnesses of those partnerships really, really can help those students. And the teachers, it's not just making work. It really is phenomenal. So thank you so much. Go ahead.
Is there any input from the students on what kind of partnerships they'd like to see developed based on Jackie's questions for the internships? Is there any undertow of programs that they'd like to see?
At this time, we don't have that information, but it's something that we can definitely put together as we're working to build this and rebuild this.
It might be nice to ask them. At least you can involve the business directly if they can contribute in that direction.
It's a great idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our English Language Acquisition Services.
Great. Our next presentation comes from the Department of Learning Services, and as our Chief Academic Officer, Jen Hester, and Director of Language Learning, Eulalia Valdez, come forward. I'll just introduce it simply by saying that the presentation tonight will focus on a summary of the Illinois State Board of Education's compliance findings with our language learning program and provide required professional learning for the board on our ELL students and programs, and then talk a little bit about programming plan for English language learners. So I'll turn it over to Dr. Hester to begin.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I want to first start by thanking the board for hearing this presentation this evening. As the board is, I think, well aware, we made a strategic move to expand the role of our previous Director of English Language Learning Services to a Director of Language Learning Services. And with that role, the responsibilities are to lead our programs for our English language learners, which includes both those programs that address ESL, English as a Second Language, and then also our bilingual education. Additionally, with the expansion of this role, we added supporting the world and classical language programs. It is my pleasure this evening to introduce you to Eulalia Valdez, who is our Director of Language Learning. I have to say, Eulalia has hit the ground running. She started in the first week of August, and in that week of August started right away with looking at our identification and assessment processes. She's been very busy working directly with our families, working directly with our teachers and our students, and has been very involved with our principals, and we are very thankful that she is here. So I will begin by reviewing the outcomes for this presentation, which Superintendent Bridges already alluded to. The purpose of this presentation is to provide the board with the annually required professional learning for English language acquisition services. So typically we provide this professional learning for you in the form of reviewing our access data and our student performance. We've also provided the professional learning in the form of providing information about specific programs, such as our dual language program. This year, with the change in the leadership for our program, and also the dual language review that we had last year, and then our review from the Illinois State Board of Education, we thought it might be a good idea to go back to the beginning and really review what's required by us for state law for English language acquisition services. So we will review our Illinois State Board of Education compliance review findings. Then we'll transition into the professional learning, which is the meat of the presentation this evening. And then lastly, we'll review the 3-year program plan for our English language learners. So we're in for a long ride, and you have definitions that will help you this evening with the presentation, and then plenty of opportunity to ask questions. So I just want to provide some information about that ISB monitoring review. In a time span of about 2 to 5 years, ISB will come and pay us a visit and do an audit. And in that process, they review our student records, our processes, and make visits to the schools. They generally go back about 2 years to review data and records, and sometimes they'll go back even farther than that. We are also, in addition to receiving those ISB compliance reviews, we are expected to complete an annual internal review of our compliance. When the Illinois State Board of Education consultants are finished, they publish a report, and in that report they provide us with findings, which basically tells us those areas of improvement, or we like to call them opportunities for us to grow and get better. We must respond with a corrective action plan, which we have done, and then we begin that process of implementing that corrective action plan. So they don't tell us what our successes are except through in conversation. So what I'll start with is reviewing those opportunities. So in the area of the findings, the Illinois State Board of Education found that we need to work on our identification process of students, so that's in the very early phases of identifying students. Our assessment, we are fine on our annual access assessments, but in working on some of the other assessments in the screening process, on monitoring students in the program after exiting. There were findings in terms of our record keeping and our notifications, and then in terms of providing professional learning more broad span to all teachers and directly within the program, and lastly in program evaluation. So for our successes, what they highlighted in conversation is that we are providing our TPI and our TBE programs, which will be reviewed later in the presentation. In terms of our personnel qualifications, hiring highly qualified staff and having great teachers in the program, and then in program plan approval and reimbursement procedures. So with that, as we move to the professional learning, you'll see that all of those things, whether they were in the area of successes or opportunities, are up here this evening so that we can understand what it is that the state requires us in providing our services, and then also highlighting how we do it here in District 203. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Eulalia.
Okay, thank you. I'll start off by going over the information regarding where specifically English language acquisition services are found within the federal law. So under the federal law, the English language acquisition services fall under No Child Left Behind. On the federal level, states are given guidelines and flexibility on how these are going to be incorporated. The state of Illinois has selected very specific ways in order to meet the guidelines, and that's what I'll be covering with you today. Specifically, when we take a look at No Child Left Behind, it addresses how we are going to serve the needs of English language learners as well as immigrant students. And specifically within that law, we're taking a look at 3 broad areas. The first one is ensuring that students are attaining or acquiring English language proficiency. The second piece is ensuring that all students are also developing the academic knowledge that is essential for their grade level and success. And the third one is ensuring that English language learners have the same expectation as far as the academic requirements that all students at their same grade level have. The identification process as outlined by the state of Illinois begins with a form that is referred to as the Home Language Survey. The Home Language Survey has 2 very specific questions that school districts may not deviate from. The first question basically takes a look at whether a language other than English is present at the home. and if so, which language is that? The second is taking a look at whether the student speaks a language other than English. At the moment that either of these questions has a response of yes, the identification process begins. At the start of the school year, schools are given 30 days to administer the screening assessment. After that 30th day, then we start with day 31, and then at that point, schools are given 14 days to ensure that the screening has taken place. Once the screening is done, what we're looking for is to ensure that the student has met the proficiency score as designated by the state of Illinois. If the student does not meet the proficiency score, at that point the student is considered a limited English language proficient student and becomes eligible for English language acquisition services. The type of screenings that are available do vary by grade level. There is a process in place for students that are entering pre-K. That screening changes at kindergarten and then moves on to a different screening in grades 1 through 12. The definition as designated by the state of Illinois, because there is flexibility, is right now in effect and has been since January of 2013. The proficiency level will change though. Right now we're taking a look at a scale score of 1 to 6, and specifically we're looking at two areas. We take a look at the student's composite proficiency level score and make sure that the student is at a 4.8. And we take a look at the literacy score, the combination of the reading and the writing, and make sure that the student is at a 4.2. If the student meets these 2 points, then the student is not eligible for services. Anything less than that, the student is eligible, and at that point we provide services. Starting January 2014, we are going to be taking a look at 3 different points. We're going to take a look at the composite proficiency level, which will remain one of the areas that is the same. The difference is that it's going to increase from a 4.8 to a 5.0. And if you notice, the literacy is going to be separated into its 2 components, reading and writing. And within those 2 areas, the student must score a 4.2 in each. Here, we are making sure that the student is meeting all 3 requirements, and again, taking a look at a 1.0 through a 6.0 scale. Once a student is eligible for services, we take a look at the different type of program options that the state of Illinois has designated that we must offer. On the left-hand side, you see the Transitional Bilingual Education Program, referred to as TBE. And in order for a district to have this particular program offered, we're taking a look at the individual buildings or schools and ensuring that there are 20 or more students who speak the same language. Below, you will see that the schools who currently meet this criteria have been outlined for you. Okay. On the right-hand side, you see the second program option, and that's the Transitional Program of Instruction, referred to as TPI. The Transitional Program of Instruction is for students with buildings, with 19 or fewer students that speak the same language. And as you can see, that basically is for all of our schools. Okay. Going specifically into the Transitional Bilingual Education Program, this program, the way that it's implemented in Naperville, is through a dual language program. So our dual language program basically meets the requirement of TBE, because right now the only language group that has 20 or more students within specific buildings happens to be the Spanish language. Now, the Transitional Bilingual Education Program can be offered in 2 different ways, either full-time or part-time. And there are different designations that you take a look at, but because we are offering it through a dual language program, these are the specific components within the instruction that must be met. The first one is that the students must have instruction in all the 4 cores in the native language, which would be Spanish. And in addition to that, they need to have instruction in ESL as well as instruction in the history and culture of the United States and the geographic region from which the students are coming from. It is also under the Transitional Bilingual Education Program that the Parent Advisory Committee is required. Okay, so that's where the parent participation and community participation come in. The second program, which we also have in the district, is the Transitional Program of Instruction. And the Transitional Program of Instruction right now, the way that is set up is that this is delivered through ELL, or English as a Second Language, at the Early Childhood Center, as well as all elementary schools. And then we do have students who are eligible for TPI all across secondary. However, the serving school at the secondary level is Jefferson for junior high, and it is Naperville North for the high school. The components that are required as far as instruction will mirror what you have seen under the transitional bilingual education. The ESL is a requirement, and the students' native language support is present, but to the extent that is necessary and possible. In addition, you'll also notice that the history and culture of the United States and the geographic region for which the students are representing is also one of the components that is needed. Okay. When we take a look at the establishment of programs, we're really looking at 2 different areas. One of them is the administrative provisions, and the second one is the instructional specifications. And what I'll do is I'll provide you an example of what would fall under each of them, but know that there are more details under them, okay? So on the left-hand side, when we take a look at administrative provisions, specifically for program facilities, that piece of the legislation is taking a look at ensuring that the equipment as well as the facilities for students who are learning English is comparable to that of the general education population. As far as course credit, we take a look at the high school, and at the high school, students who are taking an ESL course are then given the same credit as the English towards graduation. For extracurricular activities, we're taking a look at ensuring that students have full access for participation in the activities that are offered to all students. The section regarding inclusion of students whose first language or home language is English is basically stating that although a student may have the presence of English as the home language and the student is an English speaker, if parents choose to have their child tested and the student qualifies under the screening criteria, the student would also be eligible to access either the TB or the TPI program. Joint programs basically gives the district the flexibility to partner up with different schools in different districts and offer these services. Preschool and summer school, the same. With regards to preschool, we're just basically, again, taking a look at a similar concept as the joint programs. And at summer school, it's just outlining that summer school does not take the place of the regular program that is required throughout the school year. When we move over to the instructional specification side, the very first bullet addresses the student-teacher ratio, and that's taking a look at the staffing requirements. There is a requirement for 90% class size within grades K through 12, and at the preschool level, we just make sure that we mirror what the grant at that level indicates. I'm going to go ahead and add bullets 2 and 3 together because they're taking a look at basically similar components. And that is that students that are placed in the program must be placed with students near their grade level and near their age. So the guideline that is set forth is basically that you place a student within 1 grade level. Okay. The next piece deals with the transitional bilingual education program, specifically when that target language is Spanish. The law requires for the instruction that is delivered in Spanish to be aligned to the Spanish language arts standards. For language grouping, basically there is flexibility within the law to group students that have different language backgrounds in a classroom and provide them the instruction as a self-contained. Program integration basically gets at ensuring that students are part of the general education program, specifically in the areas of music, physical education, and art. When we get to the qualifications for the teachers that are going to be serving the TBE or TPI program, we're basically ensuring that teachers have the professional educator license that are endorsed at their grade level, very similar to a general education teacher. But in addition to that, if a teacher is going to be providing ESL instruction, there's a requirement for ESL endorsement. If a teacher is going to be providing bilingual instruction, there is a requirement of an ESL endorsement as well as the bilingual endorsement. This is the practice that has been in place in the district. Although there is a temporary certificate option, that's not what has been done here. On the administrative side, if a district has 200 or more English language learners, which we do here, then the requirement would be for the individual to have the professional educator license as well as the approvals within the ESL as well as bilingual and the administrative certification. The professional requirements under both programs basically indicate that on a yearly basis, staff members that are certified or non-certified will be provided that professional opportunity, in addition to new program staff members having specific professional development around the programs as well as the way that the programs are implemented in the district. And thirdly, the bilingual parent advisory committee is also required to have one training a year. On top of those trainings, there are 2 professional development opportunities that must be provided to staff that is providing direct services. There are several different requirements as far as records are concerned, but it comes down to ensuring that we have documentation from the moment that the student is identified to the time that the student has exited and that we've actually tracked 2 years. This information is continuously sent to the Board of Education through their state information system. Parents have the right to decline services and basically they request that in writing. And what we do is we make sure that parents are informed that although you may go ahead and refuse the services, the district is still responsible for ensuring that there is growth within the language acquisition piece and that we're exiting students. So we continue to administer the access to students whose parents have refused services. In addition to that, any parent that is refusing services is provided information regarding what are the different programs that are offered in the district and are informed that they may reinstate services at any point in time, and that we will place them in services that are appropriate for the child at the moment that they are re-entering services. The next section deals with the state of Illinois allows for districts to discontinue services after a student has received 3 years of language acquisition. The preschool and kindergarten are not years that are counted towards those 3 years. Now, if the district opts to implement this plan, it must ensure that the plan meets the obligations under the Equal Education Opportunities Act. As a district, we've chosen not to follow this practice. The next part deals with once we have established our programs, we basically share what our plan is. That plan is provided in writing. The parent advisory committee reviews this plan, and once the parents have reviewed it, we go ahead and submit it to the State Board of Education. The State Board of Education approves it, and at the point that it's approved, we may go ahead and begin to use the funding. The program evaluation happens in two different forms. The first one is the program evaluation, which is what the district has just gone through. And what is looked at that program evaluation is that our program meets the requirements that we have just basically gone over, that our students are meeting the annual yearly progress as it's indicated by the federal law, and that we are also meeting the annual measurable achievement objectives. The second component that is looked at is the financials, and the financials are looked at just to ensure that we are spending the money the way that we have indicated in our plan that we're going to do so. Regardless of whether the school district chooses to accept funding or not, the requirements that we've just covered must be implemented. And on this next slide, what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through an example of a student that's going to go through a TBE program in the district, as well as a student who's going to go through a TPI. The process for a student who's going to go through the transitional bilingual education program starts with the response on the home language survey. If a response on the home language survey indicates that Spanish is spoken in the home and that the student speaks Spanish, then the type of service that would be offered to this family would be the dual language program. The student is served through the dual language program until the student reaches those proficiency scores as indicated on the access exam. Once the student reaches that proficiency score, though, the student continues to be in the dual language program after exit, and the monitoring for year 1 and year 2 occur within that setting. When we take a look on the transitional program of instruction and we look at the language of Urdu, we have, again, the process start with the home language survey. So on the home language survey, the parents have indicated that there is the presence of another language, and that other language is Urdu. The identification process begins. The student is screened for services, and the type of services within the district that the student would qualify for would be the ESL. Now, this student stays within the general education classroom and receives the services either through a pull-out method or the teacher pushes in. Once again, we take a look at when the student meets proficiency as indicated by the access scores. The placement after the student has received the proficiency levels remains in the general education classroom. And then the monitoring is done through a consultation with the gen ed teacher and the ESL teacher. Okay? So that's the way that these two programs are currently implemented in the district. And now moving on to what the programming will be for English language learners, taking a look at the 3-year plan. So for this year, the goals are to review the services that are provided under the Transitional Bilingual Education Program and the Transitional Program of Instruction, review the processes and the procedures to ensure that there's compliance with the requirements of those two programs, and develop the communication and professional development plan to ensure that we go ahead and implement the necessary processes and procedures, as well as continuing on with the curriculum work for the dual language program. For next school year, the goal is to take a look at seeing what adjustments need to be done with regards to the two programs to better meet the learning needs of English language learners, to offer the professional development for the purpose of ensuring understanding within these two programs, as well as ensuring that the implementation of the processes and procedures that need to be put in place happens. We go ahead and implement the curriculum that was revised in the dual language program. For the 3rd year is basically to continue the monitoring of the two programs, as well as the professional development offerings. In addition, it's to monitor the implementation of the curriculum within the dual language program. And what questions can I answer?
A lot of material, a lot of great material. Terry?
I had a question on the funding. So what kind of, does the state give us reimbursement for this program, or?
Yes, there is reimbursement for the program. And basically, there's different types. There's the funding that is generated by the federal government, and then there's the funding that is generated through the state level. For the most part, we are not funded at 100%.
Yeah, surprising. I was glad I was sitting down when you told me that.
And so the levels of funding are provided to the district, not at the start of the school year, but we'll be receiving what that funding is probably within the next couple of months.
So you don't know what the funding amount is right now? Is that what you're saying? But did they give you a projected amount of how much they're going to reimburse? Or?
They do give us a projected amount.
Okay.
And I don't have the exact dollar amount for that, but we can certainly go ahead and get that.
I just wonder if
for
it
you.
works the same way, like with the general state aid funding, they promise you $1 and give you 80 cents or something
They
like
do, and it basically is like 60 cents for each dollar.
that. Okay.
Mhm.
It's good to know. Because, it's curious that you have to participate regardless whether you seek funding or not, so you could, doesn't seem like there'd be enough money to go around in the first place.
Right.
So.
Right, and the funding for this program is basically to supplement what is, so it's to supplement what you already have in place. So it's not, you're not going to receive 100% of what the cost is of the program, because that's not the intention of the funds.
Yeah. Well, clearly the program's necessary, and we have a pretty good, it's pretty extensive, so there's a lot of work with it. So, but I was just curious as to how they funded. But it looks very good, and I'm glad you're here on board to manage
Thank
it.
you.
Kristen?
Welcome to the district. It's nice to have your presentation. I had a question about the ISBE review. So it sounds as if the ISBE review is more focused on process. Is that correct, in terms of making sure that we meet the requirements of the law, and less about whether or not the students are actually meeting the criterion and the access? Is that correct? Or
Well, actually, it's twofold.
Okay.
It does take a look at ensuring that all of the processes are in place and that we have written procedures and that we're following that. But in addition to that, that audit also takes a look at the number of students that are meeting the AYP, and if we're making sure that our students have access and are being successful within the curriculum and the same grade level expectations as all of other students. But in addition, there is that third layer, and that is the annual measurable achievement objectives. And that's taking a look at what the federal government is requiring of our program. So it takes a look at that, and it's ensuring that students are meeting proficiency, that students are exiting the program, and that we're not keeping them
in there.
right, and that, and then it layers in again the AYP. So that's that. When you take a look at the program, it is the processes, but it's also ensuring that students are experiencing academic success and are not falling behind.
And how is our program doing?
Right now, with regards to that, we have actually, in the last year, if we take a look at the specific requirements for the annual measurable achievement objectives, we met the requirement for the state for attaining proficiency. So when we take a look at the proficiency targets, the proficiency target set by the state of Illinois was met. The target was at 60.5, and the district performed at 78.2. When we take a look at the second target, which is ensuring that our students are exiting the program, the target by the state was set at 10%, and the district was at 37.9%. And then the third one is ensuring that students are meeting the AYP target. And those are the same targets as general education, which were basically at the 92.5%, as well as taking a look at the attendance rate and taking a look at the graduation rate. And for those, our students didn't meet it with the safe harbor. So when we take a look at the 3 objectives for student performance and we look at specifically last school year, those 3 were met.
Okay. So they were able to make the progress, and that gave them the safe harbor?
Right.
Okay. So it looks like you're going to be looking at specifically adjusting the programs to continue to improve those goals in 2014, 2015. Is that correct?
That is correct. Uh-huh.
Okay, great.
So how do you take everything that you just explained to us and take it into the classroom and make it seem seamless with 26 other kids at different levels?
Okay. So that's an excellent question. So I'm going to go ahead and address it twofold. I will take a look at first going through the transitional bilingual education and then taking a look at the transitional program of instruction. When we take a look at the transitional bilingual education program and we ensure that the learning that needs to take place is at the level that it needs to take place at. That's where all the understanding regarding 2 major areas really, the content, okay, and then the language acquisition. So yes, we may have students who are not understanding and are not accessing the curriculum. And so then at that point, we're differentiating for content, just like we would in any general education classroom. Now, when we go ahead and we integrate the language acquisition component, we look at answering the question of our students in the classroom are not meeting this content standards, or they are not able to demonstrate their understanding through specific skills. And the answer is no, right? If your answer is no at that point, then we're taking a look at where does the student fall under the proficiency level within language acquisition that is preventing the student from accessing and meeting those targets. And that's where then the instruction on differentiation of language comes in. So we may have a variety of students, just like we would in a general education classroom, except we're taking a look at two areas and addressing those 2 areas. Does that help? That's on that side. So when we take a look, that's the dual language side. And we're functioning in 2 languages. We're functioning at both the Spanish and the English. When we take a look at the transitional program of instruction, and the transitional program of instruction, most of the learning is taking place in the general education classroom. However, when the student receives the instruction, either through having the teacher push in or pull out, at that moment, the teacher is also taking a look at the content and the accessibility of that content for that student, and is layering in the language component. And so the instruction is going to vary. It's going to vary specifically to the point of what is it that the student is able to do at the proficiency levels that the student is functioning. So then there is that's why the ESL is a very specialized type of instruction, because you have to not only have a very full and in-depth understanding of content, but also an understanding of how you're going to integrate that language to move students from one proficiency level to the other, and when you have a wide range.
So are the majority of the kids in the transition part of that? I mean,
the majority of our English language learners, we have close to 848 students in the program. Of those, we have approximately half that are served through, we have about 200 that are served through TBE. The remainder of the students are served through the TPI program.
So Jen, when you have a classroom full of, you have 2 kids with ADD and 4 kids that are getting some new language, and somebody that has a learning disability, and 3 gifted kids, how does a teacher, I like the word that you used, layer all that together to make that like a cohesive thing. Plus you're adding in this fantastic technology that you have. I mean, how do you balance all that every minute all day?
Well, first of all, it is truly an art and a science. And the first step is in the instructional planning process. So when the teacher considers what they're teaching for the day and what the content is in a specific subject area, right away they're thinking about what are the targets for the student in that content. And then they have to start to think about all those other, all the other factors. For whom will learning be, easy? For whom will learning be, as expected? For whom will learning be a challenge? And then in that, then they start to think about what are the pieces of content that they can access, how can they access it. They start to plan for instructional grouping and how they'll group students. They look at resources and materials. They look at ways of representing information, and then ways in which students will receive the information. So teaching is a highly, highly skilled craft. And that's what it takes in the instructional planning. Once they get into the classroom and they start delivering the instruction, as we know, students don't always respond exactly how we thought they might. So in that situation there, they are constantly monitoring and checking for understanding, and then thinking about either how are they going to redesign at the moment, or how are they going to redesign and come back at it again. And then a critical step is in the process after it's taught, where they're reviewing student feedback, student assessment data, performance, and then they're thinking about how am I going to communicate my feedback, back to the student and redesign. So they have a lot of things to think about as they're considering every learner in that class.
And so do they still have actual books, or is it all in SharePoint, the curriculum that you have for them, so they could, use kind of the different kind of things that you put at their fingertips? Is it all in SharePoint today?
So primarily the curriculum that's written in all areas, and some of it is transferred over to our new curriculum mapping process, and much of our curriculum still rests in the UBD template. But primarily, all of it is stored on SharePoint, and most of that is localized into the Learning Services SharePoint site. But as teachers teach, and if a curriculum area hasn't been in revision, they're revising as they're teaching. So there are situations where either a teacher has pulled that curriculum that they have worked with either into another digital format. It might be on SharePoint, it might be in their computers, but also I'm imagining too that there are still teachers that have binders and they're adding information to binders. But that's really the written curriculum. But then also I will say that most of our resources are linked through SharePoint so that everybody knows what are the district and the district afforded and the board approved resources.
It's just amazing. We ask such great things of our teachers, and you support them and you support the students, and it's like when you see it all coming together, like in your explanation of this today, it's so interesting to see kind of everything weave together. And then what do you do when you have a substitute teacher?
Well, when most of our teachers are proactive, and they've thought about what they're going to do when a sub comes into their room. So they have, things that are already prepared and planned, and, the teachers always take the time when they can. Someone will run over to school in the morning and drop off additional plans, or, run over, to school at night. They do whatever they can to get the best laid out plans there for a substitute. And, we're fortunate in having our substitutes as people who want to work in our district, who are able to deliver and are flexible. But I say it's all in planning.
I think we should invite some of our legislators to teach for 10 minutes in our classroom all the things that they've asked our teachers to deliver, and not pay them for it. Or not pay, give them only 86 cents or 83 cents on the dollar for whatever. It's 68 cents. I mean, it's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining our district and doing what you do with our students. Wow.
Questions? Michael?
The question is on the TBE versus the TPI, and just to compare apples to apples, if you have a Spanish speaker in he's not in the dual language program, what does his day look like? Let's say in first grade.
Okay, so when we take a look at the requirement for a TBE, it's within a school building.
Yeah, I understand that.
So if the school
They're not in one of those.
Okay, they're not in a TBE program. Then the student whose language is Spanish makes that student, if they don't fall under the TBE, fall under the TPI programming.
Right.
So then the programming would look very similar to the example that we went through for the Urdu student, where the Spanish-speaking student would be in the TPI program receiving services through pull-out or through push-in.
And I don't mean to lead you on, because my concern is with the dual language program, our very young Spanish first speakers are getting 80% Spanish. And my concern is, are they learning enough English? If they were in a different school, majority of their education would be in English. Is that not true?
Yeah, and I mean that's the way that the programming is set up.
I know that.
Yes, yes.
I'm asking, is that are we doing the right thing for Spanish first speakers? Because my experience with immersion training was always, it was immersion. Now, this dual immersion, if you went 50-50, that's one thing. But you're immersing a Spanish speaker in a 20% English environment. Are we doing the right thing with them? Is my question to you as someone that has fresh eyes on this.
With regards to the allocation of language, that I think that's
Yes.
I think that's where
Yeah,
we're
and
getting at. Okay.
are we?
All right. So
are
we,
they going to? Are we benefiting them? Are they going to be English proficient at the appropriate time?
Okay, so when we take a look at the allocation of language, the 80-20, the 20% should be within the actual academic instruction. So when we take a look at our current program and ensuring that that 20%, that that's where we want to be at, is academic English, we will need to take a closer look and see what adjustments will be needed to ensure that we are truly spending 20% of our time with academic instruction. If the academic instruction is provided, that those minutes would equate to what we see that is functioning on the TPI side, because our number of minutes on the TPI side for those students are a minimum of like 30 minutes. So when you translate that into what you see in a dual language program, that's what it would be. Now, in addition to that, we would have to take a look at how that allocation continues and have the indicators of success very clearly outlined. So can it be accomplished? I mean, if we take a look at the research, an 80-20 model is actually outperforming a 50-50 model. But it has to be an 80-20 model that is well implemented and that the indicators of success are very clearly outlined and that we're monitoring them. So if I answer your question with regards to the allocation, yes.
Well, I mean, our indicators show that it's not working for our Spanish first students in their English proficiency. They're lagging significantly, and I'm sure you know that, even though you're new to the program. I'm sure it's one of the first things you saw. But my question is, are we doing them a disservice? Are the people in the TPI program getting more English and becoming more English proficient because we are favoring the English first learners in our dual language program, trying to get them Spanish proficient? Does that make sense as a question?
No, it does. And I guess that the way that I'd like to respond to that is like this. when we take a look at programming, the program has to be implemented the way that it's intended to be implemented, and that the indicators of success are clearly outlined. In addition to that, when we implement a dual language program, there are very specific guidelines that are shared with parents who are going to go ahead and put their students in this program. Because if the expectation is to have the student have that same learning target as you would in any student that is at grade level. However, there is that component of how will we go ahead and get the students to perform where they need to be at with regards to the language. And so can a student who is a student with the Spanish language as their native language perform in a dual language program and meet the English language proficiency? The answer is yes. We just need to make sure that we have all the indicators in place, and that our instruction and that the structure of a program is set up in a way that we will ensure that happens.
That's hopefully our goal. I just remember from the last time we looked at the numbers, and I hate numbers, but it's all we have to go by. Our Spanish first students were not, our English first students were doing great.
Right, and that's
our
the piece.
Spanish first students were not doing that well, even though I think the last time we looked at them, they were through the fourth grade by the time we got the grades, because they're going into junior high now. Is this a right program? I understand that they're learning the content. I mean, I get the program. They're learning the content. Are they learning the English language fluently to be able to perform at the highest level that is necessary? Because the test scores didn't seem to indicate that.
Right, and that's part of what is going to be looked at when we take a look at the program. And the reason that I emphasize that when you take a look at the allocation, and the allocation for English, it has to be very deliberate academic instruction. And if it is not, then you're absolutely correct. We are not going to see that translate into academic success when you're specifically
when you say academic, I mean, it's not, you're not saying that 80% is non-academic.
No,
what do you mean by academic?
What I'm referring to is when a student has a learning target, and you just look at a general learning target in the content area, and let's say specifically, for example's sake, we take a look at science. Okay, science has very specific content and concepts that the student has to understand and demonstrate their knowledge in that area, okay? That if science is taught as that 20% of your 80-20 allocation, what I mean by the academic piece is that that entire concept is taken into the 20%, and that we teach that in academic terms, rather than taking that 20% and let's say that we're just focusing on one area of social language, where you're basically just spending that 20% teaching students the social and the instructional language, for example, of like lining up, working in, if we take an example at the elementary level of when you work in literacy, not literacy circle, but circles to start off your day, your routine of the day. If you use that 20% to work with students and build a community of learners, okay, at that point you are using the English language, but it's not specific to a content. So that's what I mean by your academic language has to be built in, and it has to be tied to the content.
But if 80% is still in Spanish, and once again, I want to make it clear, I'm concerned about our Spanish first learners. The classes I've observed, it's been 80% Spanish, and the content has been in Spanish. I mean, we were doing math, or they were doing math, in Spanish, which is great, especially for the English learners. But where is the English learning for the Spanish first students that in a different school, someone with the same background is getting a much larger dose in English because they're getting their ESL program, they're getting them pullouts or whatever they need, and then they're putting in with general ed. So my question once again is, are we doing a disservice to our Spanish first students by not giving them enough English in their early years?
Go ahead.
So I think you've hit on an area that we are specifically targeting for improvement.
Oh, cool.
Okay.
I was going to, as I was going to say, I was going to try to get to it with the idea that as we look at what we've presented in terms of this year with program refinement and then going into next year for program implementation, exactly what you've been hit on and what you've been talking with Eulalie on is exactly what she's been focusing on in her work.
Okay, great. Okay. I trust you guys. Thank you.
I just had a real quick question. The serving schools that you mentioned, Jefferson Junior High and Naperville North, is that because of the population? Is that why they're called serving schools, that they have a population for, was it TB, I think? Was it?
For TPI, they are the serving schools.
Okay.
And their population is greater, but my understanding is that these are the buildings that were designated as the buildings where services were going to be provided, and mostly that decision being made due to numbers.
Okay. That's kind of what I figured. And then somewhere in here, you talked about a 90% student-teacher ratio, and I didn't quite, maybe I misheard it, but then I couldn't find it again.
When you take a look at when we're taking a look at the instructional provisions, the staffing, the way that the staffing is looked at is we look at grades kindergarten through 12.
Right.
Okay. And for programs, the staffing for the start of the school year has to be at 90%, meaning that, for example, if you have students in the first grade level in monolingual English classrooms and the average class size is 20, for a classroom that is either bilingual or ESL, would be at 90%, meaning that you would take the 20 multiplied by 90, and so that would be 18.
Great. Okay. Sounds good. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Oh, I'm sorry, Kristen?
So as a part of your review, are you going to take a look at comparing the access scores of people that are in the different types of programs of the different schools and see where we're doing well in certain programs and where we're doing?
Yes, the program review is going to account for test scores.
Comparing between the two programs.
Yes, and which of the programs is basically meeting the requirements of what we just went through, the AMAOs, better than the other.
Right. So I'm sure it's complicated because the content standards is one part and the acquisition part is the other part. So it's like some of them might be doing one particularly well and the other particularly have a few more challenges.
Right.
So we have to get it all. So
Right.
it's very, I'm glad that you're there, and I'm super glad that you're taking a look at all these factors because they're very important to these students and to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both so much. Any other questions or comments? I feel that I love these nights because I really feel like I learn more about the programming. So it helps me a lot. So thank you so
Excellent.
much.
Thank you.
Great. The board has available in board docs, and you also have a hard copy for you, the audited financial statements for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2013. As you know, we have an independent accounting firm that performs an audit annually. So tonight we've made that available to you. Brad will give a brief overview of the audit and some findings, answer any questions you have, and if it's at the interest of the board to go into more depth or detail at a future meeting, he will do that. Brad?
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Bridges. As he said, the audit was done according to the governmental auditing standards. There were no material weaknesses identified during the audit, and the audit was issued with an unqualified opinion or clean opinion. And we did receive, as Jen would say, 3 opportunities for growth. So I like that term. So we did have 3 areas highlighted that we could do better. The first was with a bank reconciliation. We had an unrecorded deposit that was needed to be, it was still an outstanding item, and the person was struggling with it. So anyway, bottom line is administration will be on a rotating basis actually doing some of those bank reconciliations to make sure everything is being done correctly. Finally, another area is the capital asset records. The district does maintain capital assets, but if you remember, GASB was implemented a few years ago where we actually have to start tracking depreciation like a business. This is new for a governmental entity. We're still struggling to implement that where we actually to calculate our own depreciation. So we're working on that, and we'll get that done. And then finally, when it came to the federal program, they felt we were lacking some of the documentation required for salary verification when it came to grants. And so we'll be implementing some additional procedures. Kronos will take care of a big part of that. That's our time clock system. But then for some of the certified staff, we'll still have to do some certifications. But we'll get that lined up and should be on our way to having a clean bill. Questions?
Brad, I had a question on the capital asset side. I just want to make sure people understand. There wasn't anything that the district was, as I understood it from asking this question a number of years ago, it wasn't as if there was a misappropriation or a misallocation of the assets. It was just such a cumbersome and expensive process to identify an inventory of all these assets. It just it wasn't done in this industry, I guess is the best way to put it. It just wasn't done. And now facts and circumstances have changed, and now there's a requirement. So it wasn't as if anything was lacking. So.
Right, absolutely. Governmental accounting, you actually fully expense your capital assets in the year of acquisition, unlike for tax purposes, for-profit entities record them as assets and depreciate them over time. So this is, so now basically they're, new change in accounting standards, so they want to try to report us more like a for-profit, and they want us to capitalize and depreciate those. So it's just a new entry. It's nothing to do with the management of the assets. It's just simply bookkeeping, recording depreciation, and that's just something that we are not used to doing.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments or questions about the audit? Great. Thank you. And I do not have a president's report or any Board of Education reports this evening. I have one. Sure.
I just wanted to thank Brad for his report. And then last Tuesday, Brad and I attended a roundtable discussion on education funding in Illinois hosted by the Naperville branches of the American Association of University Women and the League of Women Voters. And the roundtable included state senators, state representatives, the director from Voices of Illinois Children, a member of the Illinois State Board of Education, and an executive director from LEND. And the information that they shared was a general review of how state funding for education is determined, data showing the large ranges of student spending and tax rates across the state, a discussion on pros and cons of how public education funding comes from local taxes instead of being primarily the responsibility of state. They talked about the 100-plus mandates that are imposed on school districts without funding. They compared what other states were doing with education funding to Illinois. There was discussion on educational pensions and how they're going to be funded, and we were told that it's still coming, possibly to the local level, and that we should prepare for that. And then possible consolidation of school districts across the state to help with efficiency, although they lifted up unit districts, were looked upon positively in that regard. Positive notes on the education reform was just that they're working really hard. There's a focus group that's working. The new teacher and principal evaluations that have been done, they went through that after they went through all the finance mess. They said, well, but this is what we have to celebrate. The new teacher and principal evaluations with higher standards, the rollout of the 5 essentials as part of the Illinois report card, and raising standards for ACT and ISAT scores to measure college readiness. And it was just interesting to hear the different viewpoints of each of the people on that panel. It was a pretty diverse group. And Senator Mike Conley lifted up District 203 a number of times during the roundtable for our high standards and financial responsibility. So, but thanks, Brad, for attending that, and I'm sure he had a whole different perspective than I did. So
great.
But yep.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's those round you learn a lot. You learn a few things. It's well worth the time. Any other Board of Education reports? And we have our Triple I conference this weekend, and it's always interesting. We all come back and learn a couple of different things and do some networking and all. It's time well spent. Listed in board docs are the monthly reports, which you can all take a look at. That would include the treasurer's report, investment, insurance report, and budget reports. And if anybody had a question, Brad, I'm sure you can ask offline, online, right now, however. And action by consent will be Kristen, because she was the Board of Education person for bills and claims. And Kristen, I have to ask you to, if you could, when you're doing your motion, exclude the Board of Education minutes for 1021. Terry was not there, so we'll have to approve that separately without Terry for 1021. So what I would suggest, just as you're doing 8.03, just break 8.03 into two sections, if you could, please. Terry just reminded me of that. So with, let you do your
Okay, so thank you for meeting with me, Brad, today. Today, Brad and I met and went through all the questions with these, so that was very helpful. With that, I move approval of warrant number 383795 through warrant number 384633, totaling $18,361,728.30 for the period of October 22nd, 2013 to November 18, 2013, and all of the other items on the consent agenda except for 8.03.
And just that one meeting. And
except for
everything in the consent agenda,
including 8.03, except for the board meeting minutes from 10/21/13.
You got it. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second for the consent agenda for all items in the consent agenda except for the Board of Education minutes, meeting minutes for 10/21/13. So we have a motion and a second. Ann?
Romberg?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Prati? Yes. Wonky?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Fielden?
Yes.
And if somebody can make a motion, please, for
I move approval of 8.03 for the 10/21/13 board meeting minute date.
second.
Second.
Great. We have a motion and a second for approval of the agenda item 8.03 for the Board of Education meeting minutes for 10/21/13, and may we have a vote, please?
Price?
Yes.
Romberg?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Wonky?
Yes.
Fielden?
Abstain.
Prati?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Our next thing on our agenda, the next item on our agenda, is the five-year financial projection. And I just want to bring to everyone's attention the masses in the audience here in person and on masses. The people, the World Wide Web can't see the whole group, so it's standing room only. But seriously, truly, these two very, very important topics, truly, the five-year financial projection and the discussion of our 2013 tax levy, are extremely important, and it's just a discussion at this point. Both of these, we will vote on the levy in our second meeting in December. So we have this meeting to discuss it, the first meeting in December, and then we'll vote on the second meeting in December on the 16th. So I will leave it to you, Brad.
Well, thank you. I've always been known to pack the house with people coming to hear my reports, so no exceptions tonight. As you know, we've been...
You're not done yourself.
Thank you. We have began a process here in District 203 to partner with PMA Financials to help us with our long-term financial projections, and using a program that they offer, which is called Financial Planning Program. It's a comprehensive, interactive program that helps us make decisions and do long-term planning. Those plannings will be used for our budget planning, tax determination, which we're here to discuss tonight, scenario analysis, the what if, and then trend analysis and just continuing to update it.
Hey, Brad, I'm going to interrupt and just ask to make sure that the blue light's on your microphone.
Oh, it is.
Both of them?
Sure is.
Okay, perfect.
Cool. Okay, I'll get a little closer. How about that? All right. Well, All right. Thank you. So what data elements drive the what we know as the FPP, or Financial Planning Program? Well, first off, we load in 5 years worth of history from our annual financial report. Very important. The basis for the launching forward is also the district working budget. When we say working budget, we take the original budget, which has been prepared several months ago, and we go ahead and we align it the best possible to bring up any differences that might be there, and bring it in line as close as possible, and we put it in as the working budget, and then that's where we launch off to start projecting out the next 5 years. We build in the tax history reports, the assessed value, new construction, salaries and benefits and enrollment, and then finally staffing. In our district, which is not uncommon to some of the Collar County, if you look at the operating funds, which are listed on the bottom there, educational, O&M, or operation and maintenance, transportation, IMRF, working capital, and tort fund, if you look at that, we have a fiscal year 13-14 combined revenue budget of about $256 million. Of that, almost 84% is derived from local property taxes. So from this, local property taxes are the most important driver of this model. And what drives property taxes? Well, it's the Property Tax Extension Limit Law, or what we know as PTEL. And that has three major factors: CPI, new construction, and then your prior extension. If you look at the factors then, the assumptions driving the property tax, as I mentioned under PTEL, the first assumption is CPI. Well, this Consumer Price Index is a measure of inflation, and here it is, I said, it controlling 83% of our revenue, or revenue growth. This graphs out our assumption for CPI. The bottom line is the levy year, and then the bars represent either actual, so 2013 and past would be actual CPI, and then 2014 forward would be estimated. And that CPI is measured as of December. So for the 1.7, which will drive the maximum the 2013 levy could be, was from December 2012. We're just about to come, well, we'll know the 2014 levy. The next piece, or the next little piece of the puzzle, is new property growth, or new construction. You can see if this chart went back several years ago, we'd even have higher new growth. But at this point, we're coming into, as the recession is ending, things are starting to come back, but we're still pretty slow new construction. You can see here we're projecting 18 million and holding it going flat. This number is not known, so in 2013, you see it's blue there, it's still unknown, and we will not know that until 2014, or April of 2014. So that's one piece that we have to, work with, not having a known number. Now, other revenue assumptions, the corporate personal replacement tax is another big one for us. We've got that in there at 2.5, which is the current estimate for this year, and then we're holding it flat. All of the revenue, it's minor in amounts, but it's as important. We have it at the current projections and then remaining flat, being a little conservative on that. Finally, as state aid goes, we're anticipating that the general state aid will still stay at the $6,119 per pupil, guaranteed minimum funding. Right now, it's currently at 89%. We've projected it at 85%. That is where they had it or talked about having it one time, but then they did bring it up to the 89%. And then finally, we've added in for the additional 80K all-day kindergarten enrollment. Other state categorical grants just being held at the current allocations. Finally, federal revenue, we have decreased that by $500,000 due to carryover funds that we're anticipating being spent down in this fiscal year. Sensitivity analysis. Why do we do a sensitivity analysis? And that's because no matter how much I could work with these projections, there's always one more question. Well, what if? Well, the purpose of a sensitivity analysis is to give you, the board members, an opportunity to really be able to work with these numbers by being able to say, well, what if? And then kind of knowing how that it would factor into the model. So as we said, first off, 83% of our revenue is controlled by PTEL. CPI is the biggest lever on that. And so for each 1% change in the CPI, that's plus or minus $2.2 million in revenue. Okay? So what if the CPI is 2.5 versus what I have in there of 1.9? Well, easy enough. That's a 0.6 change times 2.2 million. That's 1.3 million in additional revenue. So it's easy to figure that out. So what if new property comes in at 20 million versus 18 million, which we have in there? Well, that's 2 additional more million times 54. That's 108,000. So you get the idea of how this works. All right, what about expenditures? Well, under expenditures, salaries and benefits are the largest driver when you look at all across operating funds. Salaries and benefits equal 76% of our expenditures. We have estimated expenditures of $253 million. When you're looking at the salaries and benefits, for what we have built into the model is we have the current contracts plus these other assumptions. Finally, for health, life, and dental, we have built in an 8% increase. We're working through with the insurance committee the Affordable Health Care Act, which that's putting some real pressure on us from healthcare, from health insurance. Other expenditures in the ed fund, purchase services, minor increases, 2%. Other, which we have at 6%, and that's because it's for special education tuition, which is largely driven by salaries and benefits of other cooperating agencies. So that's why that's higher. Operations and maintenance, we actually have a reduction of $4.4 million. We have purchase services, 17% increase, and then 2% thereafter. That's really for some additional repairs and maintenance to buildings. And then supplies is up 19%. That's really to cover for additional utilities. Mainly, the district will be facing, for its first time ever, demand charges for electricity. And so that's going to be a big expenditure increase. Finally, capital is down by 38%, no increases going forward. That's really the final, as we've been finishing these capital projects. We're not renewing those in there at this point. And then transportation overall and toward at 3%. So looking at the certified staffing assumptions for 2014-15, you'll see an increase of 11 FTEs. That's the increase we needed for all-day kindergarten. Otherwise, we're holding the staffing to be constant. Finally, last assumptions. We're assuming no major change in the general state aid formula, no changes to PTEL. We are expecting, though, as we heard at that legislative thing, that they could potentially have a half increase per year phase-in of TRS. We are anticipating a special legislative session for December 3rd is what we're saying now. So we could hear something after that. Finally, we've factored in there. We have 89 retirees coming up over the next 4 years. We have factored in for those savings. And then the rest is just based on how accurate we projected that working budget. Same thing, sensitivity analysis as far as it goes for expenditures. Well, salaries is the largest area. So each 1% change in salaries costs $1.5 million. Dental, 1%. Dental health, $255,000. And the TRS, 1% phase-in, $1.2 million. Okay? So this is rather small, so hopefully you can see it on your screens a little better. The results, what do we have? Well, first I want to point out, partway down them, see, oh yeah, my clicker does work here. So right here, see here in red, we have just over $3 million. That is the transfer for the abatement of the tax levy. For debt service, you'll notice it's not there going forward. This base model assumes we're not abating the debt service. That decision I would recommend we would make in March. This model does not have that in right now. So there's the first. You'll notice we're projecting surplus with deficit in the future out years. Finally, at the very bottom line, we'll look at that graphically, but I want to bring that to your attention. According to our fund balance, or for our policy balance, 440 states in there that we shall aim to keep a minimum of 10% reserve before early taxes or June taxes. So we've calculated that in, and you can see in 2018 and 2019, we start to slide below that 10%. This is that same information, but graphically presented. This top line, this red line, that is the district's audited fund balances through 2013, and then going forward projected fund balances. That's as of June 30th. The blue line, that is the individual line that is the targeted operating reserve. And as you can see, when we get over here in 18, there's where we start to slide. These are in dollars, and I think in future ones I'll have them put these also with percentages, but we start to slide below 10%. Now, we ran a couple of scenarios for you, a couple of what-ifs. Well, let's look at the first one. The first one is, well, what if we abate the debt service from now until 2019? So we're not just talking about abating it for 1 year, but continuing abating it. Well, first off, the abatement is a year-to-year decision. I can't emphasize that enough. It's not a decision that we have to make, like if we make it today, we're tied in until 2019. It's a year-by-year decision. It is a cumulative cost, though. It's $3 million, and if you abate 2 years in a row, well, then it's $6 million, $9 million, $12 million. Well, in this scenario, you'll see over here, we're down to only $2.9 million. Well, that represents barely 1% of that reserve stated goal of 10, and we would actually be, that represents $15.5 million in less revenue or less resources for the district. Now, we've showed you this one scenario. Remember, we said, well, what if? Well, what if? What if we just abated for only 2013 and then moved ahead? I didn't run that scenario and print a graph for you, but I can tell you what that scenario would be. Where we would be is we would be 12.5 million higher at that ending point. So we would actually be at around, let's see, where did I write down that calculator? Well, we'd be 12 million higher, so we'd still be close. We'd still be under that 10%, but we'd certainly be better off than if we had abated for the whole time. Now, finally, last scenario we ran. I can't emphasize this one enough. This is taking the base scenario, assuming no debt abatement, so we're taxing for our debt, but just for 1 year. For 1 year, we levied underneath the PTEL limit. So instead of going to 1.7 this year, we'll only do 0.7. And then from the rest of the time out, we do that amount, whatever the CPI is. What impact would that have on us? This is a 1 year decision, but what impact would that have into the future? You can see that this is nearly the same impact as abating the bonds for the entire time. We would be clear down to just over $7 million. It's about $11.4 million impact to the district, and it would bring us down to about 2.4% reserve before early taxes. So very, very impactful decision. Any questions?
Questions, comments? I was figuring them out in my head. Let me first discuss, as I talked about in the very beginning, we do not vote on this tax levy until the 16th of December. So this is a lot to absorb. So we can ask some questions now, ask them offline if you think about them, or ask them offline and ask them again at our meeting in December, or a combination. But open it up to questions and comments.
And I will run over a separate presentation just on the tax levy.
Sure, sorry.
You want me to do that?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sure.
No problem. That'll take just a second. Okay. if everybody's, if they want.
Great.
Oh, I guess I need to grab my paper, though. Okay, so this is, here we are to discuss as part of the tax determination. We are here to discuss the 2013 proposed tax levy. As you just heard me talk about the 5-year financial projection, and I'll mention it again, 83% of our revenue comes from local taxes. So the tax levy is a critical piece to our overall financial picture. What governs the tax levy? Well, the tax levy is governed by 3 major areas. It's the truth in taxation, the school code and property tax, and then finally PTEL, which we already spoke about. What is truth in taxation? Truth in taxation requires that if you're adopting a levy of more than 105% or 5% increase, that you would need to publish a publish a notice for no more than 14 but no fewer than 7 days before the adoption, and you have to hold a public hearing. And that's what we call the famous little black box notice. And then finally, whether or not, no matter what the increase in your tax levy, you have to, 20 days prior to the adoption, estimate what your tax levy would be and let your people know, let your taxpayers know what you're thinking. Doesn't mean that's what you go with. You can adopt whatever levy you want after that, but you at least have to get it out on the table and start discussing it. Finally, school code and the property tax code. Many pieces of code govern this, but in the end, what's the most important thing? Well, they establish the timelines for filing things, the forms things need to be in, etc. So here's our adoption timeline. We're going to estimate or talk about our levy tonight. December 16th, we will have adoption of the tax levy. And then no later than the last Tuesday in December, you have to file that with your county. And then finally, by March 31st of 2014 would be the last possible time for the district to do a bond abatement or a debt service abatement. Finally, what is PTEL? We've already spoke about it. PTEL is what limits the property tax extension limit law. It limits the tax to the growth of inflation, or 5%, whichever is higher. It has the component of new construction. And then finally, whenever a district files their levy, if they're under, then no worries. That's the county. But if you're over, you file a levy that's over your limits, well, then the county treasurer will adjust that down. And most often, districts will file a levy that they will know will be a little above. That way, they make sure that if they underestimated their new growth, right, that they are able to be able to have that tax. Because otherwise, it would go untaxed. So let me just looking at some benchmarking. Looking at our western suburb, LUDA, which is large unit school districts. If you look at the EAV, or equalized assessed value, for some of our benchmarking districts, you can see here, Naperville is the 3rd highest equalized assessed value per student. Now, of course, Barrington completely off the charts, but you see there Naperville in yellow. Naperville, interesting enough, here, we fared quite well over the last 5 years. The average decline in assessed value for the group, over 5%, while here in this district, over our 5 years, we've barely been 1.1% decline. So this area has been very economically healthy compared to others.
Light blue one on the far right.
On the far right? Oh, light blue. That would be. Oh, I'm sorry. It didn't show. Oh, it's Batavia. I apologize. It's not labeled. I don't know. Sorry about that.
It's not labeled in the next one either.
No.
Okay, good to know.
Well, I guess someone needs a class, some professional training in Excel.
I just was curious if that
Yeah,
was standard.
it's Batavia. Yeah, Geneva, Batavia. It certainly is. Thank you. All right, the next thing we looked at to benchmark against is what's the tax rate. So tax rate for the districts, here we have. there is a small correlation between tax rate and EAV per student. You can see Barrington, lowest tax rate among. Naperville falls right in the, well, wouldn't be in the middle, but we're the third lowest overall, and this is all funds combined tax levy. Finally, what are we recommending here? What we're recommending is that we go ahead and we, for existing taxpayers, we go ahead and increase the tax levy to the 1.7, or the inflationary factor. We're estimating 40 million of new construction. Now we know that's a little high, but we do also want to make sure that we don't leave anything new property unaccounted. Finally, what would this result in? It would result in an total increase across all the funds, that's operating levy and debt service, of a 4.4% increase. What's the impact to an existing taxpayer? Well, if your home was valued at $350,000, you would be looking at a $193 increase. What would that increase be made up of? Well, first it'd be $105 would be from the operating levy. That's the 1.7. And then you would have $88 of additional tax if we chose to go ahead and tax for the debt service. For your, actually, as an individual existing taxpayer, on average, you would expect for your taxes to go up 3.12%. The 4.4 is including new growth, which that accounts for about 1% of new increase to the district. This is the actual tax levy comparison. So here again, the actual 2012 actual tax rates on the very left, the actual tax levy by fund, and then you have the estimated tax levy for 2013 by fund, and then the change, and then the actual estimated tax rate, and then the maximum tax rate allowed by law, which is separate from PTIL. Just want to give you some quick little things to note here. First, you'll notice there has been a remarkable shift from the ed fund levy to special education. This will allow the district some more flexibility going forward, and we're well within our limits. And then finally, we would begin to re-levy for working cash. Working cash has not been levied since 2005, and that is the appropriate place to carry a balance for working cash, which the district has a substantial need for. So you would see a small shift over the years to shift that over from the ed fund to working cash. And there again, there's those percentages that I told you of earlier. And based in our assumptions, where we came up with these tax rates, we are assuming that existing taxpayers would see a reassessment of -6%, which is very close to the last tax year. Overall, with new growth, just -5%. This is just a graphical representation of that, showing the tax levy rate. Or tax levy in dollars, I'm sorry, tax levy in dollars by the different funds. And then finally, as I already said, administrative recommendation is that we go ahead and we go to the rate of inflation, the 1.7. At this time, we don't abate the debt service levy, but we wait and consider that in March when more factors are known. One of those would be what happens on December 3rd. So with that, I would answer any questions on any of it.
Want to start, Donna? Go ahead. First of all, I sat on the Citizens Finance Committee that you put all this material out for as well, and so thank you for that. It was very thorough and a different way of looking at it than we've looked at it in the past. Can you, on this slide 10 of this, the termination of the 2013 tax levy, it just struck me now the huge increase in special ed. Can you speak to that? Because it's like a 300% increase.
Right. It is a large increase, but it's only Well, it's a matter of levying philosophy, I guess. It's not anyway saying, well, this is how much massive increase we're going to have in special education. This is just certainly looking at when you have special education, we spend about $42 million in this district, and so you have a mix. You have your local, you have your state, and you have your federal. Well, in the past, our local levy has not been sufficient to really provide for that, and so really it's just come from the education fund. And that's not a problem. In fact, that's very common throughout Illinois, but it's also permitted, and this all lumps under, if you will, take the big pie, this all lumps under PTEL, so it just matters which slice of the pie you're slicing, but these two pieces actually flow into the same fund. So it's very common for the education fund levy to be a little low and the ed fund to be a little higher. We're just being a little more proactive, and we're going ahead and balancing that out, and so now we're going to slice that up, and we're going to have our levies a little more appropriate, I guess. Nothing wrong with how we've done it in the past. It's just going to go forward, and it's going to serve us better in the long run.
Thank you. Other question? Kristen?
I also want to compliment you on all the background that you provided, the presentation that you have here and the background documentation. It was super helpful to be able to go through and look at how each individual component really impacts the financial outlook. It's such a difficult question. We have really such a majority of our funds coming from taxes, but we have unreliable partners with our other funding sources. So, you mentioned pensions, and you've accounted for planning for that type of a cost shift that could come to our district. But, even looking at additional things that may come down the pike, it's so hard to predict. The formula discussions that have been sort of are starting to brew looking forward on the state level. The federal, so hard to predict where they'll go. And at the same time, I know we also have to be aware of the pressure that the continuing tax increases have on our community. I was looking around at other districts, just checking on, how's this district handling that, and doing a little bit of research. And I think we're all grappling with that because like our community, other communities are looking at it and saying, this burden adds to the additional burden that we've had through the years. And I think if EIV was going up, this wouldn't even be a question. But just looking at it from that perspective, I think we have to balance a variety of different things. I'm wondering, I know that in the past year, we considered, I think that the CPI was 3, and there was some discussion of looking at if you levy, could you have a little bit more time to make the decision if you levied for the full amount and you considered a variety of different factors and then made a decision about whether to go backwards and abate from that based on the factors that we have, that are more clear. It's so hard to predict. For example, I think at the time it was mentioned, well, pensions might happen imminently, and we don't know exactly what that will be. And I'm not sure if we'll know any more. You have the December 3rd, but, that may or may not bring action. What type of time frame do we have in terms of looking at whether we would abate, whether it be for the regular levy or whether it be for the debt service? Is that the same time frame?
Right. You're basically the county clerk or treasurer, county treasurer would want that abatement as early in March as possible, but no later than March 31st.
Okay.
And they're very firm about that. They have to be able to produce those tax bills and have those out. And so that's really your final window.
Mm-hmm. How much does, and I know that these are just projections in terms of what we're looking for our 2014 budget. We haven't even finished that process, but how much does changing, assumptions in those areas, how much will that impact that final number? So we can look at it. It looks like when you look at your projection right now, we have a surplus.
Right.
That's with your suggested, is that correct, with the surplus?
Right. If you look at our actual details, which were all that graph and all that,
right.
We're projecting a small surplus right now for 14-15.
Right.
Based on the set of assumptions that we have built into the model. And as you know, any one of those can change. The good thing is with the tax levy, the minor part is new growth, so that's pretty, so the new tax levy is you're probably most stable. But then there's all sorts of different things, as you mentioned with the GSA, the way they're prorating it right now has not been very equitable. So there's a lot of discussion about changing that. Well, that could have a bigger impact on us because they're looking at different districts and how would that impact, and we could be impacted by that substantially. You really, I could walk through, and it's got, as I think I said in my memo, 100 different variables, and any one of those move, but I certainly gave you on the revenue side the biggest few, and on the expenditure side the biggest few. Now, on the expenditure side, the largest ones, we have contracts for a lot of that. So we're, unless, other than in staffing, that would be one variable. But as far otherwise, we already have union contracts. So, as far as the 14-15 budget, it's starting to, we still have, don't get me wrong, there's still a lot of movement and things we can do, but we are starting to, move in there and solidify the planning.
So the variation that would be, that we would see for if we said, okay, let's tighten our belts here, or let's do this here, you think that it would be minimal, or?
Well, it is in all things. I mean, what I'm saying is staffing is by far our biggest lever. So if we've already got contracts in place, so now what we're talking about is changing how many adults typically with students. That's where our largest is. That number's still changeable up until, I believe, April.
Right.
So,
and we predicted, I think you said you predicted flat for the future assumptions as well as for the current year, except for the addition of the FTEs for all-day kindergarten.
That is correct. That is correct. We're on the out years, we're being very conservative on that. We know we're going to, but we're also showing a deficit out there. We know we're going to have to be making things, but we're also in the process of a new enrollment update. We want to get that finished before we really start planning on those out years.
Right. So it's difficult to know the impact for the out years.
Right.
Even if we wait till March, we're not going to have too many of those factors. Right. I mean, we might know legislatively what's going on, but even so, it would only be for that specific period of time. It's hard to finish up those out years.
Susan.
Brad, the new format is aids so much in transparency. I think anyone can look at this and see what they're looking at. One thing I really miss from it, and maybe there's a specific slide that I should be looking at, there's so much new information here. We've been using that chart for a long time that has where our expenses and our...
Where the lines cross?
Yeah.
Yeah. We all like the line cross ones, right?
And it really, but it really helps, like, kind of in all the things we talk about, or when you add, or, it's like the one visual representation, but I love these new things where you can really kind of dive in and understand what's going on in each section, and how it seemed before that some of these things were invisible, and now they're very...
We should be able to bring that back, I think,
That'd be great.
At the December 2nd.
That'd be great.
Right.
So is this the format that we would expect?
Yes.
And this is what you use to guide you and your team. That's great.
One thing I will say is, this FPP model, once we start honing it down and we just keep honing it down, it becomes the backbone for our next budget. And then as soon as we finish that budget cycle, we update the FPP, we start honing it down based on these changes in the environment, it becomes the backbone for the next budget, and it just keeps rolling. And so pretty soon it just becomes very comfortable, and we're just constantly in this one year after another. We know where we're going, and you always have a kind of a 5-year look out there. So nothing's going to sneak up on us. Not that we're in danger of that, but, this is going to give us a 5-year look at all times.
That's great. Thank you.
Going back to the PMA presentation, the PMA slides, and on slide 16.
This slide?
Yeah, I just want to make sure I understand it.
Yes.
So the $3 million that we would abate, that's part of that was the referendum that we did several years ago for construction, correct?
Right. It's the debt service.
Right,
Mhm.
sure. And this graph here projects if we continue to abate that going forward. No? Or
I'm sorry. You're talking of this one.
Right.
Yes. This here, this graph here, and I appreciate that, and we'll get the crossover lines for you, because it is rather hard on this. If you follow the red line, when the red line starts to dip in 2017, there is the first indication of a deficit. So under this scenario, scenario one, under bond abatements, we would be able to go to 2017 before we have actually a deficit. Now, what's interesting about that, let me just pull up these numbers here. Let's see, did I calculate that? I didn't I should have calculated what percentage. Will probably be, at that point, we would probably be around 7% So we would actually be dipping below that 10% margin. Don't quote me on that calculation, but we'd be around 7%.
So we can bring that information to December
So you'd
2nd
be
also.
below the 10% reserve.
We'd be below the 10%. And the reason why, okay, so even though we hadn't ran a deficit to that point, remember, in order to maintain that margin for cash flow, every year you have to have a small amount of surplus to be able to keep up with the cash flow needs. Or, as we say, you'll be using your credit card to pay payroll. And we don't want to be in that situation. So even though we're not hitting a deficit till 2017, we actually begin to erode into our 10% cushion that we need for that cash flow.
And that's without taking, that's with abating the tax?
That's with abating taxes.
Okay. So where would we be if we took the tax? If we took it? Where is the slide that shows?
Well, if, that's right there. That's the
just
base
trying to
model.
correlate the two. Okay.
The base model assumes that we would not abate, but we would go ahead and collect that. And you could see, based on the base model, on that very out years, we would still be at 2018, we'd still be at 9.53%.
Maybe we go back one slide. I don't think everybody saw the bottom line. That's the helpful one.
The numeric one. Yeah,
Right.
there.
On the very bottom.
At 16.
Right, here.
There you go.
Yeah, thank you.
That's
Yes.
the percentages without an abatement. So I think it's important to realize how darn close we are to 10%.
Sure. So when does this ability to tax this extra money run out? What year?
I believe 2027, I think, is our last payment.
When it's paid off.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think if you go the whole term, it's like real close to 2030.
Okay.
It was 2008 that we took it out, so.
But in 2019, we're still going to run a deficit.
Based on these, now, when you're looking at a financial model, realizing inherently you're always a little conservative on revenue and you're a little aggressive on expenditures. One of the other things to think about, too, the closer you are in time horizon to a decision, the better the decision you'll make. So when you're looking at 2019 and you say, well, we're projecting a small deficit out there. Yeah, well, we're going to have some time to worry and take care of that. Trust me, we'll never let that happen. But will we make decisions today that were concentrated on 2019? Absolutely not. We'll make decisions today that are sound financial decisions for 14, 15, and those sound decisions will have an impact for the next eons, okay?
So what, in March, for us to, let's say, to take the abatement, what factors would you like to see to recommend that we can go ahead and take the abatement?
Well, first one I would want to see is if the state makes a final determination of where they're going on with this pension, okay? The other thing that I would like to have back in our hands is our facility assessment and know what we have out there. I mean, our facilities are in great shape. But I would like to have that back in hand and making sure that there's nothing out there that we should be concerned about. And then, that's probably some of the two biggest ones. And then as, of course, with the state, unfortunately, I'm just going to tell you right up, we won't know anything about state funding until October. We'll have to make a decision well before that, but we should get maybe some more indications of where maybe they're talking. Does it really seem like they might actually redo the GSA? This prorating they've been doing is very unfair for low poverty or for poverty districts. So they'll probably look at doing something different with that. That could have a big impact on us. I'd like to have at least an inkling of what that means for us. So those are some of the big ones we'd like to have at least some kind of more indication for before we make the decision on the abatement.
Brad, the other thing, to Susan's point about the schedule that we call the crossover schedule.
Yes.
The reason that is so beneficial to me is when we're sitting here doing in an open meeting, which is a great place to do it, if we just change an assumption a little bit, we can see we're kind of used to seeing those numbers. And I think to Mike's point, this is what's kind of humbling when you look at that all important to me in particular, and I'm sure to a number of other people in the room, that board reserve is so, that fund balance, that 10% of fund balance is per board policy is so important. So I think that will really help, and I want to thank you for taking a very, very complex situation, and you're new to us and new to the district, and you did a real nice job of simplifying. You can't make a lot of this real simple. So, but thank you, and those people at home that are all watching, besides the ones that are sitting behind you. But other questions now, and again, we'll have another conversation. Yes.
So on slide 17, I just want to, when we were in the Citizens Finance Committee, there was a lot of questioning about this because it is a new slide. And so, and I know that you've adjusted this for the 10% that that the board is the board policy. But I just want to make sure that the community understands too that when we're looking at the difference between the red line and the blue line, the red line is where we're at our highest point, and the blue line is where we're at our lowest point, trying to make sure that we stay within the 10%, correct?
Pretty close.
Okay.
The red line is actually one snapshot in time. That's June 30th.
Right.
Okay, so the reason why that line is why we need two lines, if you will, because the red line is just one point in time, and really it doesn't really it's the fiscal year end. Right. It really doesn't measure. I mean, it does. Don't get me wrong. It has a lot. It's a point in time in which we measure up, if you will, the end of the year. But what the blue line does is the blue line takes a look at our actual cash. And it takes a look at that cash reserve and says, okay, if we haven't got those taxes in yet, what would be our balance as of the end of the year? So we want to, at any, and you're right, that's the lowest point, right? So at any lowest point, we want to keep that cushion to make sure we have our normal, our appropriate amount. And, these numbers, I mean, I know they appear large in the millions, but, this is a large organization, and we have a large, payroll and a lot of expenses. So it doesn't take much to, burn, to use this. Exactly.
Terry? Oh, I'm sorry, Michael.
Sorry, Mike. How much of the pension shift is included in here?
0.5% per year. So half, 1.5, etc.
Okay.
Sorry, Michael, I'll let you.
Well, two things. To piggyback on Donna's question and Brad's answer, the way I always looked at this is, the red line is your checking account the minute you got paid.
Yeah.
Which is nice, it feels good, but then you got your mortgage payments, you got your utility payments, you got your babysitters, you got your groceries and everything else. What's more important for us as a board and what our policy is based on is how much do I have the night before I get paid? And we don't want that to get below 10%. Remember, that's one of the major reasons we got a AAA bond rating, and we were able to finance everything at a very low rate. So there's a reason for that. It's somewhat an arbitrary number, but it's an important arbitrary number, and we want to try to keep that in mind. The other thing is I don't want anyone to get too carried away with 1 year of surplus because, like we've always said, and like many people have said in the community, it's not about this year, it's not about next year, it's where are we going to be 5 years down the road? And we have to, and that's why I applaud this. It's where are we going to be 5 years down the road? And if we think about it now, we don't have to panic now. So we just keep on planning ahead, and that has to do with expenses, but it also has to do with revenues. So as we make these decisions in the next couple of months, let's not focus on a small surplus in any given year, but also look at what we're looking at down the road, because it'd be pretty silly to make some short-term decisions for various reasons, and then in 3 years go, oh, now we're out of money.
Right.
So let's make sure we keep the long-term perspective in our sights.
Yes.
I think without a doubt you're right. Interestingly, we had a bigger surplus last year than this year. So it was noteworthy that there is a surplus, but I thought it was very helpful to look at the surpluses for the past couple of years as well. And it looks like, just in terms of your expertise, we so value it because no matter which projection we look at, we probably have work to do in terms of, as you mentioned, looking towards the future and saying, okay, as we get closer and as we get closer, we can adjust things to be able to ensure that no matter where we go, we're at the higher range where we want to be, just based on our decisions. And so I know you have lots of ideas, and I know you're working on efficiencies and all those kinds of things. You talked about that at the kindergarten, and I think that's just, I know that we've been able to, in many cases, it looked as if we were going to have a situation where we needed more funds, but we were able to prevent that by, the different kinds of things that they've done throughout the district. And that's to the district's credit, all the things that have gone in the past where the red line continues to go farther out in the future. And so your expertise and guidance there in terms of how we can make our red line go farther out into the future, we definitely want. So thank you so much for that.
Any questions, comments? Okay, again, keep digesting all this information, and just to make sure, Brad, if we can circle back to what the tax levy determination this evening was really about 20 days before we decide on the tax levy. We have to give the community an indication, and where I think the administration has been exceedingly transparent. If you look at in board docs, the actual resolution that we will agree to on the 16th of December is in board docs as a draft. So the document, if we take the full tax levy of the $221 million, that document, as we will look at it a month from now, is in board docs as a draft, just for transparency. So, again, we'll have more questions and more comments, but I didn't want there to be some confusion about what this 20-day and resolution and all. We're not agreeing on anything. This is all discussion, as it will be at our next meeting. But what we're discussing, or the maximum amount that we're going to be discussing, is what we've put in here to be conservative. So, next, I think these will to discussion with action talk. I'm sorry. Thank you so much, Brad. To discussion with. I guess Brad doesn't want to talk about the sidewalk.
Well, I'll talk for him.
Okay, you talk about sidewalk.
Sure. Earlier this fall, a concerned resident contacted the city of Naperville, concerned about the proximity of a sidewalk along Washington near, pardon my presidents here, on Washington Street near Jefferson Junior High School. And very near the intersection of Washington and Bauer. I believe I sent you a picture to just give you an indication of that. Upon reviewing that, we agree that there are potential pedestrian safety concerns. The city has requested from us an additional public sidewalk easement of about 350 feet to move that sidewalk further away from Washington to increase the pedestrian safety. We've had their proposed easement reviewed by our district council. They approve of the attachment and the resolution that was brought forward. We're supportive of this. Do believe it would not impact any programming that we have or be a concern of us. As a matter of fact, it would be to our concern in the positive sense that it would provide greater pedestrian safety. So Brad or I can answer any questions that you may have, but we'd recommend that you approve this resolution.
I move approval of the sidewalk easement for Jefferson Junior High School as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Item number on our agenda, 10.01, sidewalk easement at Jefferson Junior High. Any other comments or questions? Ms. Bell?
Romberg?
Yes.
Fielden?
Yes.
Wanke?
Yes.
Price?
Yes.
Crotty?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Fitzgerald?
Motion carries. Thank you. Our next item is Summer School 2014, which we've had a discussion on at our last meeting.
Great. I'd say the same thing. We at the last board meeting, the Deputy Superintendent Ken Osborne and Director of Summer School Kevin Okevich, both who are here, to answer any questions you may have, presented information to the board about proposals and recommendations for the 2014 summer school. We'll answer any questions you have, but we have no new information to present.
So after the last board meeting, Kane, you sent me the documentation that the committee is reviewing in terms of the summer school committee. I thought it was excellent. I read through that. It was really looking at the learning rates for different kinds of students and types of students, and the impact of the summer school addition to the school year in terms of, pardon me?
Like almost a semester.
Kind of, yeah. But it was so compelling looking at that. I thought the research was so compelling, and I really wanted to compliment the whole administration, but you specifically for bringing forward, just looking at so many of the things that we're grappling with, the achievement gap, the addition of all-day kindergarten, how we're able to help our students with that additional time and how that translates to academic growth. The study suggests that just adding on additional growth may not be enough. That some students really may need the addition of summer school to be able to, make up the kinds of gains that they need to make to be able to catch up with their peers. So I thought that was really great research. I'm so glad that you're reviewing it. And I've been talking about the summer school program since you had your presentation, and people are very impressed with the idea of not just adding the additional having the additional time for students academically, but combining it with the Park District program so that it makes it easier for students. One thought in terms of your efforts to try to publicize it, that Park District partnership might be helpful in terms of advertising, because they come out with their camps and all their different things in their book, and perhaps it would be helpful for them to understand, for folks who are looking at that camp, to understand the academic offerings that are included with that, if you're able to use that as a partnership. But in talking about it with others, parents who are looking at programs for their students for the summer, I think that it's a great program, and I think it's really great that we're able to look at how we can ensure that we're able to help students keep their academic gains throughout their tenure, and not go backwards in the summer. So thank you for all your work on that.
Thank you. That's what the committee is aiming to make happen.
Kristen, I think that is a great comment. People wait for whether it's the online version or the paper version of that, the Park District camps, to plan vacations and to plan life. And that'd be a great spot if people know that there can be a little bit of a curricular bent, fun work and play. So that's great. Any other comments or questions about summer school? And I'll entertain a motion.
I move approval of 10.02 for summer school 2014 as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second for item number 10.02, Summer School 2014. Additional questions? Ms. Bell?
Robert?
Yes.
Fitzgerald? Aye. Waukee?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye.
Crotty? Yes. Price?
Yes.
Fielden?
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you. We have scheduled events on our agenda next. Everyone can take a page through. It looks like we're getting that close to that crazy 6-week period at the end of the year. And if there aren't any other, Julie, you don't have anything to highlight in there? I don't think there's anything in particular. Well, sometimes. And we'll do entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay. Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. For me?